Sure. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts within this field. And as probably a lot of you thought when you invite a person that's basically managing all AI activities within a mining company, the first thing that pops up into your head is probably mathematical models, data science, or some architecture and infrastructure or software engineering. But actually, what I wanted to talk about or start off with is dating. Um, I'm a bachelor, I'm into the dating scene myself, and I think there's a lot of lessons you can learn from the dating scene when it comes to developing and deploying AI solutions and digitalization within our industry. So, hence the title Swiping Through Dating Disasters and AI Heartbreak, the start of a love story. And I'm Rasmus Tammia. I'm the program manager, R&D program manager for artificial intelligence in mining at Boliden. And I thought we were going to start off by from a hopeless romantic's perspective and the perfect love story. And if I think about myself, at least when I was younger, I probably was a hopeless romantic. Hopefully, I'm not as much today, but they do actually have some characteristics or traits that are worth mentioning. First off, they are very, very optimistic, almost to the point where they get sort of this tunnel vision because they're so determined to reach their goal. And also, they often fall in love with the idea of a person instead of accepting the harsh and brutal truth. And they're very well aware of that the partner or person they're dating isn't necessarily their best match when it comes to love, but they often tend to disregard that. And also, on the same theme, they tend to ignore all sorts of red flags, whether that's that their partner or date is abusing them in one way or another, or something like that. They just totally disregard that. So let's take it from a hopeless romantic's perspective. And as probably all of you know, online dating is kind of the go to when it comes to meeting someone today, right? And then platforms or applications like Tinder is the is a good place to start. And what you do there is that you download the app and you upload a little bit of information about yourself. And in my case, it would be something like this that I would probably tell Tinder that I like racket sports, tennis. I think the Australian Open is probably my favorite tournament on the ATP tour. Uh, I'm actually a guitarist way back, so I play a lot of guitar. I think John Mayer's latest album, Sawbrook album, was quite good. Also, my coworkers and peers think I spend way too much money on hair products, and I often tell them that it's a small price to pay for high self-esteem. So yeah, I put a lot of effort into my hair. I have a little bit of background within engineering, and I like reading books and hanging out with our family dogs. So all of this that I just told you, I would upload to Tinder in one way or another. And what happens then is that my profile is exposed to um, all Tinder users within a certain range. And since I'm a hopeless romantic, of course, I'm so determined to find the one true love of my life. And for those of you who don't know, Tinder actually relies heavily on machine learning algorithms. There are tons of them within the application. One example of that is, for example, this is that Tinder actually is able to through these algorithms, cluster together people that share kind of similar characteristics or traits. Um, so in this particular example, me, Henrik Lundqvist, the former goaltender in the New York Rangers and the NHL, and Peter Parker or Spider-Man are clustered together in this multi-dimensional vector space, as it's called. So why are we clustered together? Well, me and Henrik share a big passion for hair products. Me and Spider-Man, we're both nerds and have a background within engineering. And Spider-Man and Henrik, because they're both heroes in their city called New York. Um, and then this girl in the bottom left corner, Emma Stone, pops up and she starts swiping on Tinder. And maybe in the beginning, the application or algorithm is a little bit shaky. But as she continues swiping, it starts to learn her pattern and her kind of what traits she's looking for in her future partner. So this arrow starts pointing towards the cluster where me, Henrik, and Peter Parker are located. And sorry, Peter, this time you're not going to match with Gwen Stacy or Emma Stone. Now it's this guy. So since I'm a hopeless romantic, of course I get super excited about this, and immediately what I do is that I start planning our first date even before it actually has happened. And how I would go about that is something like this. I'd probably pick her up in my beautiful Volvo S70 from 1999. It's a real beautiful car, has 128 horsepower, 5-cylinder engine, works really well. I'm actually Finnish as well. So I'd probably set the table with Iittala, kind of tied to my roots in one way or another. And I'll also serve her my signature dish, which is my mother's recipe for macaroni pudding. It's really delicious. I have to show you the recipe at some point. Like I said, I play a lot of guitars. So I'll probably choose John Mayer as a musical choice for the evening. And after that, okay, this is where the presentation gets a little bit narcissistic because now I'm all of a sudden portrayed by Ryan Gosling. As you probably can tell, I like La La Land quite a bit. So we hit the theaters. I think it's perhaps a bad idea to go to the movies on a first date because the idea is to get to know the person you're dating, right? Not to stare at a screen. But regardless of that, we're having a great time. And after that, we hit the mountains here in Skellefteå. We start spontaneously dancing. We fall heavily in love with one another and look deeply to each other's eyes and say, I love you even more. And we start planning buying a house close to a lake, having 3 children, 2 girls and a boy, and a family dog, and live happily ever after. And again, all of this happened in my head prior to even actually gone on a first date. And maybe I actually was able to get that first date with this girl, but reality happens. What happens was this. Um, this is a coworker of mine, Emma, at our office, and she gave me the biggest slap in the face. I don't remember if it was because I started swiping on Tinder when we were having a glass of red wine, or if I insulted her in some way regarding to Harry Potter or something. Needless to say, the date didn't go as planned. And if I were to illustrate this in one way, to summarize my dating experience, it would be something like this through this horse, which started off really good in the back of my head and went on pretty well until we had a glass of red wine, and everything just went downhill from there. And the question I want to ask to you guys is, do we often come across this horse within the mining industry when we work with digitalization? And to give you a better answer to that, let's look at a project that I've been running within Boliden. It's called AI Operator Support, where we are developing a operator support solution to the flotation operator. So you have the flotation process, and we want to kind of stabilize the copper recovery. So what you have here is the blue line is the current episode or current copper recovery, and the green one is the best historical episode when the process had similar characteristics, kind of like in Tinder, similar internal states. And in this case, it's probably the same incoming tonnage to the concentrator plant or incoming ore grades. But the thing here with this AI-based solution is that it's actually recommending to the operator that, well, it's too much to ask for you as an operator to be there at the top green line, but you could probably be within this shaded area. And we started off, this project started off as a proof of concept, and we now have our first kind of online version of it, but we're still developing this as we're moving along. But then I often ask myself this question: are we going through an AI heartbreak? Whether it's this applications or some of the other R&D projects that I'm running within Boliden. And just to give you a feeling of some of the obstacles that that we often see, let's deep dive into that. This picture was provided to me by Shiva Sander Tavale at ABB Corporate Research. She's head of their AI lab in Västerås in Sweden at Corporate Research. And without trying to understand too much about the time axis and the level of digitalization axis, we can conclude that the mining industry sucks. I mean, we're falling way behind when it comes to digitalization. The only industry that's even worse than us is the agriculture industry. Retail, finance have come a real long way. ICT, they're really ahead here in Sweden. We have companies like Ericsson, which have probably the biggest R&D budget of all companies here in Sweden. So yeah, we have a lot of work to do, and actually that's really exciting. So good to know that I've had job security for a long time. But here are some of the problems, some of the obstacles. First off, industry is a zoo. If you think about an application like Tinder, whenever you develop a machine learning model that, for example, is going to kind of map out the characteristics of their users, it immediately reaches out to such a wide and big user base. And whether we often say that people are different from one another, but we aren't necessarily. And also, machine learning and AI is really good in this because there's a lot of psychology and stuff that we people have a hard time to kind of explain. So that's where we can really draw benefit from the power of AI. Whereas in the process industry or the mining industry, we tend to more go with a lighthouse approach. So let's say that I develop some sort of an AI or machine learning model for a motor or a conveyor belt. We can't really reuse that model in the same kind of easy way as Tinder. And also you have very much dependency between these assets. And also in a lot of our cases, you can come a long way with traditional first principles physics. So differential equations and stuff like that. And also the data, the amount of data isn't necessarily all that good. Also, there's so much data because we know that these systems really need a lot of data, or machine learning models need a lot of data to be able to draw conclusions. There's plenty of data, but very little information. And where was I going with? Yeah, so, but the problem here is that we have these control loops or automation processes running within our concentrator plants, and their main purpose is to stabilize the process. Because if you think about it, manager for a concentrator plant, all they want is to have a stable process. So, but this quickly becomes a problem when we try to model things with these data-driven methods. Because, well, think of it as in dating. If you're sitting on a date with a really cute guy or girl or whatever, if you talk about the same thing or don't even say anything at all, it's really hard to get to know that person. And the same goes with this. So you really need to capture these windows where there's actually something happening. And that is really, really hard. And also, for those of you who know control theory, there's a lot of causality involved here, and it gets kind of mixed and intertwined. And that is easy to kind of forget if you don't have a solid foundation within control engineering. So whenever I send to a data scientist or run these projects, let's say that I use 9 months of data. Turns out you can probably only use like, I don't know, 2 months, a month and a half. That's actually that contains some kind of useful information in the end. Also, I always throw in a little bit of Star Wars references in my presentations. So in episode 6, Luke accepts that Darth Vader actually is his father. But then he confronts Obi-Wan and asks him or tells him that you told me in A New Hope that Darth Vader betrayed and murdered my father. And Obi-Wan's response to that is, of course, yeah, what I told you was true, but from a certain point of view. And this certain point of view is something that is really important to address here. All of a sudden, when you're working with digitalization, regardless of whether it's AI or not, you have these two fields of engineering that have had nothing in common in the past, and all of a sudden they have to start talking to one another. IT people and people like myself, we tend to work with products and frameworks from, for example, Microsoft or Google that are really hard, even for ourselves sometimes, to understand. And for us to explain to process engineers what edge computing or Azure is, or platform or software as a service, it's really hard because these process engineers, they do their monthly reporting in Excel sheets, and they often also tend to look at them as some sort of a database. That is actually not too uncommon, uh, at least here within Boliden. And I want to be very clear that I don't mean any disrespect to either of these professions. My point here is more how different point of views these two uh, fields of engineering actually do have. And now all of a sudden they really have to start collaborating more and more. And it's hard. We see that all the time. And again, considering all of that, whatever project we're running, you end up with this horse again, whether it's related to the data quality or some kind of bad discussions between IT department and process engineers, you end up with this horse. And but is there a way for us to kind of overcome this problem in a way? And I hate to sound like an evangelist, I really do, but there's actually one mindset that I think we need to embrace more within our industry. And that, of course, has to do with how we conduct projects. And to be more clear and specific, it's the comparison of the waterfall method, project method, and the agile framework. Our industry is so used to and so obsessed working with the waterfall method, meaning that you start off with some sort of requirements and you break them down, and as the project progresses, you eventually end up in maintenance and implementation. Whereas in Agile, which has a background from software engineering, I also have a background from that. What they figured out was that there's got to be a better way of conducting product development. So that's where this Agile framework came to be. And I'm not going to deep dive into roles as Scrum Master or Product Owner. But the main idea here is that instead of doing something like a hopeless romantic, where I overthink everything beforehand and plan each and every detail, and end up actually just delivering something at the end that didn't turn out so good. In Agile, what you want to do is you want to have a continuous delivery and a close collaboration with your end user. And based on the feedback, you're going to take a new direction in the application or the solution or the product that you're developing. This is by no means revolutionary in some industries, but in the mining industry, I still firmly believe that we're in the top part of the picture. So whenever we conduct projects within my R&D program, because it's innovation we're working with and software engineering, we have product owners that do sprint planning, whether that's together with internal resources or external parties, and we do this with an agile approach. And it has worked tremendously well and really accelerated our AI journey, I'd say. Also, regardless of whether or not you're working with Agile, we also saw that even though we had this Agile way of working, we saw that it was difficult for us to move from kind of first idea to some sort of more production or closer to a production solution. So with that in mind, we created what we came to call Boliden Edge Lab, which could be viewed as a AI accelerator platform for Boliden. And to be absolutely clear what this is, we combine the ways of working from the cloud with powerful hardware inside our own firewall. And it's entirely hosted by my R&D program, and it's a cross-functional collaboration between the R&D department and the IT department. And I'm by no means a cloud solution architect, and we're not going to deep dive into all of the stuff that you're seeing here. But there are two two main takeaways from this picture. First off, let's start to the left. Whether you're an internal resources working internally at Boliden or part of a university or a third party, you can choose whatever tool set you like. I'm talking about Python, Julia, MATLAB. You can do whatever you want. Other thing is that this entire cloud way of working and having what is called a Kubernetes cluster set up on-prem inside a firewall, for example, is how other modern companies are working when it comes to digitalization. Here in Sweden, our startup scene is really mature and has come a long way. So companies like Spotify work like this. Google works in the same way. So I'm actually really proud to have this in place at a company whose core business is to move rocks and not work with software. And the reason why we do stuff within the firewall, well, there are two very simple explanations to that. First off, our data sources are within the firewall, so it becomes easier. And also because if we do it inside a firewall, I don't have to start arguing with the IT security department. So this is in place, and all of the applications that we are running within my R&D program are executed within this Boolean Edge Lab. So that's really, really good. So the Agile framework in combination with Boolean Edge Lab, if we're going to go really agile, we're going to go, instead of doing a long, big project, we're going to cut it down to smaller sprints. And the main idea here is that you put a lot of emphasis or plan more in detail sprint 1, but not as much sprint 2 and 3, because again, you don't know everything about the future. You adjust as you go along. So you do sprint 1, you fail. You do sprint 2 and you fail. And the beauty of this is that when you have these small, ugly horses, you will have turned your big horse around. So you'll end up with a really nice, beautiful horse's ass. And that's kind of how we do things right now. And it works really well for us. And just to give you another example, sometimes we work with external startups and parties that claim to be agile, but when you look at their kind of plan, it turns out that it's not so agile. Without looking too deep into the different kind of work packages here, what I want to emphasize here is that instead of going through phase 1, 2, 3, and 4, you want to iterate through all of these phases multiple times. That's kind of the takeaway from this slide. Okay, so AI heartbreak in dating disasters. What have I been babbling about for the last 15, 18 minutes or so? Well, first off, whether it's dating or digitalization in the mining industry, both those things are really hard. And trying to plan everything in advance is just setting up for a disaster. That's number one. Number two is also, it's really important to embrace change over actually following a plan. And if we're talking about dating and relationships, I know a lot of you probably are married, have been married for 10 or maybe even 20 years. You probably aren't the same person today as you were when you met the love of your life, because you came across obstacles, but you powered through and found new directions in your relationship. And that is just beautiful. And also, agile is so natural to us in our everyday lives, but not necessarily at our workplace. Also, last Star Wars reference. So in episode 8, Luke has gone insane, more or less, and he's about to set the entire Jedi library on fire. And then his old master Yoda shows up and tells him that, don't you remember that just before I died, what I told you was that the greatest teacher failure is. And I think that is really important when you work with this kind of agile, because I've told you that, yeah, things are going great within Boliden, but we also fail a lot, like many, many times each week. And just to have kind of lower our expectations a little bit has done wonders in how we conduct our R&D efforts. So, wrapping up, the hopeless romantic and the start of a love story. I've been bashing on hopeless romantics now for a while, but if there's one trait that they do really well, and it has to do with optimism, is that no matter how many times they fail, they always pick themselves up again and again and again. And that is really important when you work with AI in the process or mining industry. And that's essentially my message. So go break some eggs and go on some disastrous dates. Thank you very much.